Hi, thank you for tuning in with SABIFF 2023. We are so glad you got a chance to actually see a film that dealt with the anniversary, actually. It was inspired of the anniversary of the riots that happened in Beaumont. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that with the writer, the producer of this particular project, who is also appearing live in person at the Carver Library here in San Antonio now, showing both of his films, The Example and the documentary They Will Talk About Us, the Charlton-Pollard story. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring on Gordon S. Williams. Hey, how are
Hey,
you?
doing well, and you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy man, doing a
Thank
lot
you
of
for
things.
giving me
So,
the opportunity to talk about these projects.
yes, yes. So I just want to just get started. I mean, how did this story come about for you to write it, and why didn't you want to direct it? Because I know you're a director as well.
Well, back in the early 2000s, I saw a line in a book that was
Mhm.
about Black movie posters from the 1900s, and it said that there were race riots in Los Angeles, Detroit, and Beaumont, Texas in 1943, and that was it.
Hmm.
So, living in Texas and everybody that went through K through 12 in Texas went through Texas history, and this was something that I'd never heard about.
You and the rest of us. Like when you told me, I was like, Beaumont had it right. So so how did the project come about? And your interest in writing
So
it?
I actually started talking to one of my colleagues or students here. I work at Lamar University in the communication department, and I talked with Wyatt Cagle, who directed The Example. We started a documentary about the project or about the race riot, but things didn't materialize like we wanted them to. So in 2012, we decided to take that research that we did and create a fictional story based during the race riot. So Wyatt and the other producer, Kenneth Dupuy, they were going through fatherhood at that time,
Mm-hmm.
just starting, and then it made me reflect about what my father taught me. So using the research and the theme of fatherhood, I started working on the script, The Example.
So I mean, we know about Tulsa. We definitely, those are things that are taught to us. But just from your research, what are some of the things that you came across that were shocking to you? Just researching it firsthand.
There was a lot, and I'm still finding out a lot.
Mm.
Uh, People were reluctant to talk about it when we initially started doing research in the early 2000s. We were actually uh, politely kicked out of someone's house.
Mm.
They agreed to allow us to come in and talk about it, but once we came in with the lights and the cameras, they changed their mind.
And this is an elder, obviously
Yeah,
an elder.
yes, it was an elder in the community at the time, and the basic gist is due to an alleged assault and assault that did happen in the community, along with Beaumont being a shipbuilding mecca for World War II. Populations that were not familiar to the area were coming in, and that caused food shortages and housing shortages. Blacks and whites were competing for jobs at the shipyard. So it was a lot of tension between the black and white communities during that time.
Mm-hmm.
The Ku Klux Klan was scheduled to have a convention right after the planned Juneteenth celebration.
What year was this? I'm sorry, because we didn't.
This was 1943. This was 1943.
Mm-hmm.
So there was word of an assault, and they found the assailant and they took him to the jail. It happened to be the daughter of a shipyard worker. So once the shipyard workers found out about it, thousands went down to the jail wanting to serve their own justice. The police chief refused to hand the person over, so those white shipyard workers went into the Black community, destroying homes and businesses and such. So the city was under martial law for 3 days. And shipbuilding was stopped for the war.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, over 200,000 man hours were lost of production during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say how that event shaped Beaumont or race relations in the area because it's hard to gauge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to gauge, and Beaumont is, I mean, at that time, was it primarily white population, Black population? I mean, I know it was separate in terms of where we lived.
The exact numbers I don't have. I just know that there was a huge population boom in Beaumont and Jefferson County because of the work that wartime provided in the shipyards.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when you have people working to try to keep their livelihood and tensions building in the community and such, and then food shortages, and there was concerns about the war as well. So there was a lot happening that kind of created this powder keg.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering because Beaumont is near Houston, Louisiana, and then Port Arthur, all that time. Like, I'm just curious what was going on around that area, because I know there was that time they were still hanging people, and
Right.
just a lot of craziness.
Yeah, there was definitely racial tension in the
Yeah.
area, and the fact that there was going to be a Ku Klux Klan convention in the area, I think this says a lot of
Wow.
what the mentality at that time.
Mm-hmm. So are you a big history buff? Or
So,
what excites you about researching and learning about the past, if you are?
well, growing up, I was that odd sibling that wanted to stop on the side of the road and read the history markers and that kind of thing. But I'm a storyteller, and just happened to come across this historical information that's kind of helped boost the creativity. So I'm a storyteller at heart, and history is a part of telling stories. Very important stories that need to be shared to understand where we are, where we came from. With this project, the example, it's created a dialogue that people normally wouldn't have. Conversations about racism, commonality, humanity, and other subjects are coming up after we screen this film. People want to talk about it, and that was our purpose in making this project. We want people to have discussions about what happened then, what's still happening now.
Well, and that's important, and that's one of the things that I was wondering about in terms of, because here we are in Texas, and we know that the governor's passage of banning books and banning different parts of history, especially as it pertains to us. Stories like this get buried further and further and hidden and disposed of. So has there been any citywide or school-wide support with this particular film that deals with this aspect of this particular incident in history,
Well,
especially in all my school systems?
we actually completed the film and premiered it in 2016. So during production, we actually had help from the city of Beaumont as far as telling the story. And I also work at Lamar University, like I mentioned, and the production team and a lot of the people that worked on this project came through this television studio. So they have a connection to the Department of Communication. And people have been very supportive of the people that are on this crew.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it was funny to me when we were actually doing production. There were some comments on the internet that was like, I can't believe you all are letting these Hollywood filmmakers come in and tell this story. And it's just like, no, we're here.
We're from Beaumont. Mm-hmm.
But no, there was skepticism by some blacks and whites in the community that did not want us to touch this story. But all these years later, this project seems to keep resurfacing when things happen in the news cycle in America. So it's had a longer shelf life than we ever expected. And uh, I think it's because those discussions still need to happen.
But why was the resistance? Why was there an issue with you all bringing this story to the forefront? I don't
I
get
mean,
it. You what?
yeah, again, this was both black and white.
Okay.
People were leave well enough alone, or we don't need to talk about that.
So
And
people know about it then in that particular area because we.
yeah, some. I mean, for example, I attended or went to a screening that we held for this at Prairie View, and there were several students from the Beaumont area there, and they had never heard about the race riot or even the Charlton-Pollard community.
Hmm.
So they said the first thing they were going to do when they left their screening was to call their parents and ask them why they didn't know about these pieces of history in the city that they grew up in. So again, some things get lost because it's painful.
Yeah.
Some things get lost because at times there may be a thought that younger people are not interested in hearing what happened in the past.
History. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important that these conversations are had.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that if you can entertain, you can educate. People may not know about the 1943 Beaumont race riot, but subconsciously, when they watch this film, they're learning. They're being informed. And that's the power of art or creativity. Again, if you can entertain, I feel like you have the ability to educate.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm sure every city in the South probably had a race riot at some point or time or another. But there are some that are more powerful in terms of getting the attention than others. Of course, Tulsa is one of them. We have Rosewood. But yeah, it is important for us to dig back and dig up the painful part of our history, oftentimes to just to be informed and educated about what we've gone through and how far we've come. So it's very important. Um, I had asked the question I didn't. So why did you decide to just write this? Not just write, but to write and not direct this particular piece.
Well, I've been working with Wyatt and Kenneth for a number of years, and we all know our strengths. Um, we're all using our own money, or we're all working together to raise money
Mm-hmm.
for these projects. And we decided we need to go where our strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
So mine is writing and producing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, the fact, Kenneth and Wyatt, they are two Caucasian males.
Mm-hmm.
There were difficult discussions within telling this story, but they were necessary for the finished product to be on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
We were deciding whether we should do this or not because when we were in pre-production, Baltimore and Ferguson, Tamir Rice, and a number of other things were happening at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So we felt like we had to be very mindful of the message that we were putting out at
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Wow. It's just amazing. What's transpired since then. We say we progressed, but then we still have moments in history where we're dealing with very similar issues, um, very impactful, especially on our community. Um,
Yes, and when George Floyd, when that situation happened,
right.
the example came back. So um, we were able to again share this story and get people to have conversations and hopefully a better understanding of themselves and others.
Mm-hmm.
There's been often that we may see a cluster of people coming in, some group of white people, group of black people, they're all in their sections,
Mm-hmm.
but after the film is shown, there's conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These people don't know each other, but they're talking about race and humanity and commonality,
Mm-hmm.
questioning are things better or how can we make them better.
Mm-hmm.
People are afraid at times to have those difficult conversations. And again, I feel like this film brings that to the forefront.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why that is, those difficult conversations, because they need to be had. Definitely need to be had. I want to just talk about changing a beat here. I want to talk about your journey. How did you get into filmmaking, documentary producing, writing, directing? How did you get into to this field coming up? What was your where are you from, and what was your journey to get to this point?
I grew up in Cleveland, Texas. It's an hour north of Houston. And growing up, I always sat in the floor and watched television and watched movies and just kind of wondered how that magic came to be. So that led me to go to Lamar University in the mid 90s. And their television program was just coming back. So I saw that as an opportunity for me to kind of come in and learn and be able to create. So I had the opportunity to create a music video entertainment program called G Sharp that helped landed me a internship at Black Entertainment Television. So that was a valuable learning experience there.
When
And
were you at BET? Because I worked there in the mid to late '90s. When were you there?
the summer of 1998 at Teen Summit.
I was there during that time. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Yeah, in '98, I was working at Bet on Jazz. That's crazy. We crossed paths and didn't even know it.
Indeed, indeed. So
Wow.
after my internship, I came back and graduated and had the opportunity to work at the local ABC affiliate. And then a year later, the job came open at Lamar University here in the TV studio. And I've been here since 1999. But
Mm-hmm.
also during that time, while helping students get skills in communication and media, commercial, television, and film production, I've had the opportunity to work on my own creative passions and be able to create opportunities for those students to learn as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the advantage of working at a university. I mean, you have not only can you bring students on as apprentices or interns, but you're in that environment where they're just learning new things and just having an impact on them is very critical. So that's awesome.
And it's one of those things to where I've been here for over 2 decades, and we've created a culture that kind of feeds into itself. So those students that were here in the mid 2000s, now they're in the area or in Houston with their own production jobs, and they're creating opportunities for the students here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very proud of what we've established here.
Mm-hmm. No, that is great. Um, I wanted to just, I know we just seen the example, but you're gonna be in San Antonio also talking about it as well. But we're gonna also show, is it the Charleston, the Charlton,
Charlton.
yeah, Charlton-Pollard story, the oldest Black neighborhood in Beaumont. Tell us about that film also and how it came about. Um, yeah, and because that was released, we played that in our film festival last year, SABIFF. So I definitely wanted to bring you back. It was such a quality project. But tell us about that particular project and how it came about, and why you chose to delve into that particular neighborhood there.
Well, the Department of Communication and Media was actually approached by ExxonMobil. They wanted to give students hands-on experience working in their field. So the idea was suggested that we create a documentary about the oldest Black neighborhood in Beaumont, which is the Charlton-Pollard neighborhood. My colleague Jonathan Tippett and I started researching and found out there were some amazing and powerful stories. And we had to get those students prepared to help tell this story along with doing research. So I was amazed at how the students connected with the interviewees and hearing that history and that community sense. There were some emotional times during the documentary to where people were crying and such, and that emotion was met. It was equal with the production crew.
Mm.
And that's, again, that's the power of creativity, or that's the power of art. So these students, again, they got paid. Valuable experience that they can put on their resume. And they learned history. They learned something about people that don't look like them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a powerful experience.
So the actual documentary is about a young documentarian interviewing the history in that area, the oldest Black neighborhood in Beaumont.
Mm-hmm.
But in real life, you had students actually working behind the scenes shooting it.
Yes, on the productions. Yes.
Oh, life imitating history, history imitating life. What is the biggest thing that you've learned with that particular project? Because people were so passionate about that community and the memories. They literally took you there through the interviews. You feel like you were a part. You could touch, taste, feel, touch that particular sector of Beaumont.
I think that's the most powerful thing about it.
Yeah.
People, again, that don't look like us are relating to that story because it takes them back to their community and nostalgia. But the people that do look like us, they are remembering those communities when they were growing up. They remember, the musicians coming through to play at the Black venues and the businesses that were in that community. And a lot of that is lost. I think you need to be able to see other people succeed to be able to do the same. So if we're not telling those stories about these successful Black neighborhoods who were creating revenue that stayed in the community, we lose something there.
Yeah.
So we need to be able, first, we need to document the history, pass it along within the family or with somebody, because in researching this, we found one gentleman that had close to 2 terabytes of historical documentation he's been holding on to for decades.
Wow.
So without him, being able to tell that story would have been impossible.
What did he? What was he using? That was he shot that VHS and film? And like, what was his?
VHS, he had
Wow.
Lynn Simon, who was actually in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the historian of the Charlton-Pollard High School. And within that, he started picking up stuff from the community as well. So again, if people aren't holding on to this history or these documents and passing it down, there is information that is lost. My grandparents owned the oldest Black business in Cleveland, Texas for a number of decades. So within telling the Charlton-Pollard story, it helped me have a greater appreciation for my history and my family and their legacy.
And that's one thing I think that's important to relay, not only to this generation, but to people in general, especially now since recording and documenting is so accessible to us. Before, you had to have money for a VHS recorder or whatever, but now you can just use the smartphone, cell phones.
Exactly. I mean, I tell people all the time, if you have this and you use it, even you may not see value in it at that point in time. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you still have that. You have captured a moment in history. Even if it's just your nephew
riding a bike,
or doing a popular TikTok dance. You know, that's going to, that is going to be generational. That's going to be a milestone. Hey, I remember when. Even if it's just in the family history, being able to connect to those good times, or even being able to connect to those difficult times in hopes that we can all do better. I think that's important.
I mean, just documenting is important. I got a chance to document my my grandparents, and I still have. They've been long gone since the '80s. I still have that documentary. I still have that video. And every time I watch it, whenever I miss them, wherever I need to see them, I can pull that up. It's priceless.
Indeed.
That you can. Not only that, I've passed it on to my daughter who wasn't even in existence, and she can show her kids, and so that's the part of family history that stays with us. And so I want to, I always try to encourage people, interview those elders. It doesn't even have to be elders, but interview people in your family, your friends, whatever. Sit down for an interview, find out about their lives, and that moving image that you preserve can stay with you, stay forever.
Indeed.
Especially in the digital age.
Having those conversations, it's important.
Tell us about Black history and moving pictures. Tell us more about that. Is that part of your mantra, or is that a company? What is that exactly?
That is the screenings that we've been holding with the example and the Charlton-Pollard story, because this is the first time that these stories or these nuggets of history have been shared in this medium. So we've had the opportunity to take this to colleges and universities and show the presentation. We're having talks about everything from racism to media production to the history. It crosses a number of disciplines. Again,
you got good reception with that?
most
feedback. Yeah.
most definitely. I had the opportunity to go to the Texas State Historical Association in El Paso in March and do a presentation on the race riot and the example. And because of that, being able to network in the historical field that's creating opportunities to go to other colleges and universities. And
Mhm.
I'm finding out that there's a gap between historians and creatives.
Mm.
So
That's a deep statement. That's a deep discovery, actually. Is it a huge gap? And how can we work on getting that gap narrow? Because it's if the two working together is powerful.
I agree. And that's what I'm hoping to find out. So uh,
Good.
I've just kind of gotten into the historical discipline within the last 2 years or so. So
Mm-hmm.
having the opportunity to meet these people, and when you hear these amazing history facts, it plays so well visually.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to find the money, find the resources to be able to tell these stories.
Hmm. Yeah, that's key. So just looking toward the future, do you have any plans underway for your next production? I know you're shopping, you're screening, doing screenings and traveling with these, but what's next for Gordon S. Williams?
So for 11 years before the pandemic,
Mhm.
I was hosting a Latin dance event called Salsa at Cotton Creek Winery once a month. So I teach salsa and bachata lessons, and then we dance the rest of the night.
Hmm.
The pandemic took that away from us. So this community was not able to come together to be social.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to document our first night back after the pandemic. And that
Mm-hmm.
was in November 2022. So the story is more than just about dance. It's about, again, community. It's about what people went through and what they lost. I think we all lost a lot during the pandemic. So maybe 5, 10, 15 years from now, somebody will look back at this work and it could give people a glimpse of what happened during that time
Mm-hmm.
and what we experienced.
Okay, so I got to go back on bachata and salsa in Beaumont, Texas. You're teaching. So how did you become interested in that? I mean, my daughter loves it, but she spent time in Panama and got exposed to it, and then now she's just loves it, Afro Cuban stuff and music. And but how did you get involved in that? And how's that going for Beaumont, Texas? Wow.
It's great. We've been dancing in this area for almost 2 decades now. So, uh, again, I've had the opportunity to be able to facilitate some of these events. So, I got started because I went to a restaurant in Houston and got hooked. So, I was driving Cleveland to Beaumont to work, and then Beaumont to Houston to take lessons.
Wow.
And then, thankfully, for my wallet, they started dancing out here in Beaumont, and just kind of been a passion of mine ever since. So with this project, I get a chance to marry my love of Latin dance and media production.
That is awesome. No, I love to hear that. I love to hear that because people think certain cities you don't even see salsa and bachata in Beaumont, Texas.
Yes.
You see some Zydeco maybe, but
Hmm.
I think that's awesome. Good for you.
It's one of the most diverse nights in Beaumont. And again, I try or want to educate people to where, especially people that look like us, the rhythms and the percussion and all those things, they're from our culture. They
Yeah.
originate in West Africa and such.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a documentary, like you said, it's a documentary right there to expound on.
Indeed.
So, what advice? I know you work at Lamar and you're constantly involved with children, with students.
Hmm.
What advice do you have for young up and coming filmmakers, either in the documentary realm or the narrative realm, in terms of steps or things that they can do now to get into this area? Because a lot of times, a lot of people I talk to, you know, they're like, well, I didn't have any examples when I was coming up. I didn't see like things like me or images like. So, I mean, what advice do you have for those who may be watching?
Well, I mean, we talked about the phone earlier.
Yes.
You have this. You can get started with this. The principles of storytelling, filmmaking, media production, and stuff. You have a camera. If it's just getting a tripod and getting a light or learning a little bit about lighting from YouTube, you could start telling stories from there. Mm-hmm. I hear people all the time saying, well, I don't have the right camera, I don't have this and that. It's just like, focus on the story. What are you wanting to say? If you get that solidified, you will find the means. I mean, people are shooting entire movies on their phone.
Yep.
I'm also going to say be patient and then find your tribe. Find other creatives that have different skill sets. I learned, initially I started out, I was writing, producing, and directing and doing all the things. But once you find your tribe and you find people with various skill sets, if you're able to just hone in and focus on your strengths and work with other people and they're leaning towards their strengths, this is a collaborative art form. And I think that's important to find your creative tribe.
That is so well said. A lot of times, if you do get the opportunity to go to college, you should leave college with your tribe. I mean, you should build your tribe in college, your studio. I look at people like Spike that did that, and before he moved on, to make his first film. So that is very good advice.
I mean, I jokingly say I want to make ends with my friends. So, I mean, it's just like the people that I've created work with. I want to continue doing that and see what other opportunities come through.
Yeah, so true. And also, do something you're passionate about. Delve into things that you're passionate about, because that will come through in the work.
Indeed.
So I want to thank you. I want to first know, how can people reach you, find out more information about your works? What's the best way to reach you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Gordon S. Williams. You can also look up Gordon Scott Williams on Facebook. For Beaumont's Black History, we've been adding updates and screenings and stuff on the LUTV News Facebook page. So if you go and like us there, you will see information about upcoming screenings and such.
Okay. And have folks watching, bring Gordon S. Williams to a screening near you. You can check out the Facebook page. Well, I want to thank you so much for allowing us to profile your work. And thank you for joining us in San Antonio as well. We really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm honored to participate.
Great. All right. Well, you take care, and we'll see you soon. Take care.